Our next speaker is Cameron Camp. He's a security researcher with ESET. He's been working on critical infrastructure security issues for decades, starting with the U.S. Navy and its weapon systems electronics, and continuing on through industrial controls and other highly secure electronics in both government and the commercial sector. Cameron, we're looking forward to your remarks. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Interesting that the Congressman was mentioned a couple moments ago that he lives. I actually live just up the road from him. He talks about national, sort of large-scale disasters. Our county had 200,000 acres of fires, and so we had to learn how to respond within that context. And I think that informs my interest in critical infrastructure. I'm a security researcher with ESET. We're a global cybersecurity endpoint protection company, and we were heavily involved in the industrial, the hacking of the power grid in Ukraine, and the things that led up to it. And so I think there's some notes we can make and observations we can make based on that. And actually, I wanted to talk about. There was the one you read about, which is hundreds of thousands of people without power in the middle of winter in Ukraine. That's not a good thing. But actually, a longer investigation, we found that there was actually a chain of events starting about 4 years prior, where they were sort of rattling the doors and testing software that did limited functionality, and then building up in a modular fashion until we actually saw the attack in 2015, 2016. Then we still saw that those tactics and those tools used across other sectors, whether it's financial sector, whether it's natural gas, whether it's transportation in Ukraine and also in other countries. And I'm interested to read now that we're seeing this VPN filter. Some of you follow that. So it's hacked against routers. And so that's kind of interesting because it's got a very wide infection rate at the moment. And one of the things it's looking for is Modbus traffic. If you know much about the electrical grid, you know Modbus has been running the electrical grid or pieces of the electrical grid for decades now. And while it's a very robust in terms of availability, in terms of reliability, there's very little in the way of authentication to secure Modbus, and so we're concerned with that sort of thing. But I think another thing that I'm also concerned with, and speaking with a lot of engineers in this space, is that a lot of them aren't digital natives, and the people who are very good at running a plant, that's probably 50 years old, 30 years old, 20 years old, I really think we need to focus on education. So I'm interested to hear the comments from others in the room and from and what the policy conversation is, because the question I get from senior engineers that are pretty close to their retirement or looking to sail off in the sunset suggests to me that they don't understand maybe even some of the basics in terms of packet networks or IT security. The things that, if we're, as a security researcher, we've been talking about for decades. We finally got the medical industry to get a little bit closer up to speed on that. Are questions that we shouldn't be hearing from the senior staff running critical infrastructure. And so I was asked, earlier today, we were talking about whether the attackers are going to be focused on power generation or, where exactly they might attack. And thinking like a cybersecurity person, which is, the soft underbelly, I'm going to go to the end of the line where it's lightly protected. And probably when I get there, I'm going to get an engineer who is not familiar with many of the tactics I'm going to try to use. Ukraine did some pretty, I would say, freshman or sophomore activities in order to allow the initial infection to get in there and start shutting down the equipment. What's also interesting about the attackers behind this, because we spent a lot of time studying that. In fact, one of the things we analyzed actually had a welcome sign, welcome for our company. Hey, ESET, glad to see you. Great. Well, so they're getting to know us. Was that the commands they sent to the electrical system to do what it did were correct? In other words, it was doing what it was supposed to be doing. In this case, it sent some different signals to get some gear to shut off. But it wasn't that it was misbehaving. It was doing exactly what it is. That suggests a level of sophistication on the attackers to know the target and to be able to go after them in the way that makes the most sense. Again, they try it for years. Then they launched some attacks. One was pretty successful. Several others weren't. And then in subsequent years, they patched the holes that we kept fixing and others in the security industry and try again, and now we see it across many hundreds of thousands of routers. So I'm really concerned about what it's going to take to sunset some of the engineers who are not digital natives and so don't really have much of an incentive. I was talking to a friend of mine, he's an engineer, he said, I'm at the top of my career, I have to learn this another irritating thing about IT which I don't understand. I'd rather just go to Jamaica and, go sailing off on the sunset. That's terrible, but, and so that's my fear. And so they'll tell me in private, I don't really understand how a network works. That's not a conversation they're going to have in public. And so if I was an attacker and I was looking to exploit that, I can think of many different ways. We're here to educate. I'm here. I'm really looking forward to the comments that the other folks have today. I will tell you that we're going to see more attacks using the modular framework that we saw in Ukraine and other parts of the world. We're seeing them now. The question is, what's the payload, and how's that, and what's the best place to attack? And so I'm really looking forward to the conversations we have today. Obviously, I could really get deep in the technical weeds, but my wife, just has this, my eyes glaze over. And maybe we can talk about that later. But it's really interesting to hear because every one of us rely on the system. And it's not just the power. The power goes out, the water stops a minute later. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I really appreciate the invitation to talk here at this event, and thanks to Lexington, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the rest of you guys have to say. Thank you.